All right, have and have not fans. Now, you know the drill. I'm not even going to harp in on this opening. If you haven't subscribed to the channel, I highly urge you to do so for new content posted on nearly a daily basis. This channel itself is almost at 950 videos with over 32,000 subscribers. So join the family by hitting that button and the bell notification icon. Now, this is a hot topic of discussion that broke in news earlier last week. I'm sorry, I wanted to do this video a lot earlier than obviously today, but due to the fact that the Haves and Have-Nots episode Team of Rivals ending with that pimp slap from David to Veronica took the internet by storm, I had to do videos on that first. But this video here, okay, now if you've been on this channel long enough, then you know that most of this channel is definitely Tyler Perry content focused. I think some of my first non-Tyler Perry content in terms of talking about entertainment, news, and media was the Monique boycott of Netflix saga that happened earlier in 2018. And to be honest, you know, after her appearance on like The Breakfast Club and The View and I think Sway in the Morning, I kind of thought we heard the end of it in terms of, you know, this whole, not just the Netflix thing, but of course, even before that, you know, telling Tyler Perry, Lee Daniels, and Oprah Winfrey to suck her, you know, if she had one. But I was a bit surprised when this story dropped, and I actually am going to post a link, rollingout.com, because you know what, I just want to make sure this video is in fair use. I know that I could use clips of the actual phone calls to listen. We can listen to them and then discuss them, but just to be on the safe side, because I want to talk about my full thoughts in this video without this video being taken down or demonetized. So there is a link in the article below where you can listen to not the entire phone call, because I guess you could say released clips of the phone call were from Monique. You know, there are like 3 different parts of the phone call that were released to about 13 to 15 minutes of the actual conversation between Tyler Perry and Monique and her husband / manager Sydney. And, you know, of course, I read the article first, you know, just so I can get an understanding of what was going on. That way, when I hit the play button, because again, there are 3 different audio clips and you can listen to each one below. So again, if you want, I would highly recommend looking at the article, listening to the clips, and then coming back to this video. That way you kind of get a full idea of what I'm talking about here. Maybe I should have said that at the beginning, but you know, in any case, Tyler Perry took it upon himself to call Monique. It was a situation where he took time out of his busy schedule to contact Monique in order to make amends about this whole, you know, thing about Precious. The reason I want to say this, I want to talk about my thoughts on what I heard of the phone call, because I can't talk about the entire phone call, because to be honest, if you ask me, and again, this isn't, you know, discrediting Monique, because to be honest, I feel the fact that she released this phone call to the public discredit her. She discredited herself. I'm sorry. That's just how I feel about it. I feel like this phone call, the chunks that were released, part of me feels like this was the part of the phone call that Monique and Sydney wanted us to hear, instead of the actual full phone call itself. Like, if I heard the phone call in its entirety, I would definitely dissect it piece by piece to give you my full thought and analysis. But given the fact that we got 3 separate chunks, I have a feeling that we only got what they wanted us to hear. That's what I feel. And when it comes down to it, let me just talk about how I felt about the phone call. I feel like this phone call was almost an exact replica of Sydney and Monique. Well, Monique was the only one physically at the Breakfast Club, and Sydney was, you know, over the phone, you know, speakerphone, so everybody else he can hear, and then he could talk and everybody could hear him. I felt like it was the same exact scenario. You know, basically, what I'm talking about here is Tyler Perry took time out of his schedule to call Monique to try to make things right, because apparently it was all about the fact that allegedly he publicly said that Monique was difficult to work with or something along those lines. But if I'm not mistaken, Tyler Perry even said that he personally have never worked with Monique one-on-one. And I know at one part of the phone call, you're talking about, you know, well, Tyler, you know, you said you're going to do this. What about Oprah? How does she feel about it? And Tyler's like, look, I can only speak for myself, not Oprah. And to be honest, I got some notes here, so I'm going to try to stay on track with this conversation. But this phone call is all over the place. If you listen to the Breakfast Club interview, Monique came up on there, and that video has got over 3.3 million views. I think it's one of the highest, most viewed interviews on the Breakfast Club. Monique came on that platform, and to be honest, when I thought she was coming on the platform, I'm like, maybe it's not just to talk about the Netflix thing, but to give fans, information about what her plans are, like her next special. Does she have another movie coming out? Because I'm not going to go into my whole tirade or rant like I did in my Monique boycott Netflix, because even though $500,000 to her doesn't seem like much, I feel like, given the fact that Monique really hasn't done a lot of big projects in recent years for the next generation of viewers to know her as well as I do. I'm 26, so I grew up watching the Parkers. My mom, I would overhear her watching the Queens of Comedy. I remember Monique being in movies here and there, like Two Can Play That Game. I got the entire Parker series on DVD. I remember buying that not too long ago. So I remember Monique during that period of time when she was up there with like the Bernie Macs and literally she was up there with the Kings of Comedy, so to speak. But then she kind of faded away. I know she had her own talk show and everything too. Like, she was up there, but then she kind of faded into the background. Then the next time I saw Monique, that's when she had that, she changed her diet. So she lost a lot of weight. And, then from there, the next big thing for Monique that I remember was Precious. Like, personally speaking, I didn't watch the movie. It didn't look like the kind of movie I would enjoy. And I remember my sister watching it, my mom, but she didn't like it. So I overheard some of the dialogue. I wasn't a fan. Like, not to say anything about the movie, because she got an Oscar for that, which is awesome. So congratulations on that. But it wasn't my cup of tea. The next big project that I saw Monique in was in Almost Christmas, which, not one of my favorite Christmas movies, but Monique was my favorite part of that movie. So there were obviously a lot of other top tier actors and actresses who made the film funny, but Monique's character was my favorite off the film. But Monique, to me, isn't like a big name comedian, not taking anything away from her resume, which is something that was brought up a lot during the Netflix whatever. But yeah, she definitely left a mark in the comedy world. But I don't really think of Monique when I'm looking at thinking like a Chris Rock, Dave Chappelle, Steve Harvey, Bernie Mac, DL Hughley, and the list goes on. Like, if Monique dropped a Netflix special, I don't know if it will be up there with like the Chappelles or the Chris Rocks, or, to be honest, even D. Ray Davis. I love that Netflix comedy. That's not to say that Monique isn't funny, but the last time, I remember, what was it? Like, I Could Have Been Your Cellmate, and then, the Queens of Comedy, and even in like her TV shows and whatnot, most of her comedy revolved around like, being a plus size black woman, and then, talking about skinny bitches and whatnot. That made up like 90% of her comedy routine. To be honest, I would be interested to see what would a Monique comedy special look like, because it will be highly evolved, because like I said, when I was a kid, most of her stand-up revolved around her being a big bad bitch, and then talking about the skinny bitches. So I'll be interesting to see how she would create another stand-up, because most of her original material came from the weight thing. But moving on to the whole Tyler Perry situation, Tyler Perry called her up, tried to make amends. To me, it was like, like I said before, we don't have the full phone conversation, but based off what I heard, Tyler Perry gave her a call to try to make amends, extending an olive branch to, make things right by, checking, look, I'm going to do what I can to see about, the money that's been generated from Precious to make things right, to send you the money and whatnot. And he was actually going to take care of it. But then Sydney jumps on, and it's all about, well, what about you when you said, it wasn't right how Monique was treated? So it's I really don't even know what they wanted. Like, was it an apology? And if so, what was it for? Was it for saying Monique was difficult to work with or something, even though Tyler Perry then said that I haven't worked with Monique? So it felt like that's the problem. Every time it seemed like Tyler Perry and Monique, the conversation was going well, Sydney would jump in. It's like, things were being, it was like the bridge was being, put back together, but then Sydney would just come throw a rock on it and then make the whole thing collapse. Like, going back to the Breakfast Club, if you go back to that interview, she really went on a rant because she was upset of being called Donkey of the Day. Literally, that entire interview was literally her and Sydney going back and forth with Charlemagne, about why she was called Donkey today. And even after he like love or hate Charlemagne, I feel like he did explain himself. Like, he talked about what have you done for me lately culture. And I agree. It's like, you really can't call for a boycott of Netflix because you're getting offered $500,000 while other people are getting, multi-million-dollar deals. So the everyday, working person, whether it be a younger kid or, a guy that's a middle class, that can afford Netflix because cable is so damn high. How can you ask them to boycott Netflix? Because even if you get your multi-million-dollar deal, what's that going to do for the average man or average woman or average kid? Not to mention the fact that, again, the what have you done for me lately culture. Say what you want to about Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock, but they've been on tour. Like Charlemagne, I'm not a fan of Amy Schumer. Like, I'm not a fan of her comedy, but you can't ignore the fact she had like a best-selling book, sold out Madison Square Gardens, had a movie out. I'm sorry, I forgot the name of it. I know it was a big movie, but Monique, yeah, Almost Christmas was a good movie, but at the same time, it wasn't just you. You had Gabrielle Union, aka Being Mary Jane, Carrie Hilson, who's been out the black. I guess you could say Monique talks about being blackballed out of Hollywood, while Carrie Hilson. Apparently that beef with Beyonce or something like that. I forgot, but I loved her music when she was still out there. You had Danny Glover. Love that guy. I love that guy. Gone Fishing is one of my favorite movies from childhood. Then you had so many other people who made up the cast of that film, yet Monique is like, she talks like she made that movie. And like I said, she was my favorite character on the movie, but I didn't watch it just for her. Now, again, if Monique put out a comedy special, I don't think it would get as many views as like a Dave Chappelle or Chris Rock. But I always said that if Monique, like, I can't tell what to do with the money. I think that $500,000 was a bit low. I definitely think she's at least worth a couple million. I feel like, if I were her, like, I know my attitude, like, I love proving people wrong. I would have taken that money and then killed it on that comedy special, like blew, like, Amy out of the water. That way it's like, look, now next time you come to me, yeah, you better hand me the big bucks because my views and the reviews prove that I can bring it, unlike, what you expected me to do. And I was like, okay, instead of going on the Breakfast Club, which is a major platform to promote, new material, where you came from, what you're doing now, what you're planning on doing in the future, and giving, listeners an insight that they might not have had before. Like for me, I was thinking, okay, well, I'm interested to see about the whole Netflix thing, but I'm really curious about what Monique is doing next, because instead of going on a comedy tour, she's just been going on a boycotting Netflix tour. Like, I haven't heard much about what she planned. She still says the comedy special is going to happen, but I feel that she should definitely do something to make her, and I hate to use this word because she's accomplished so much, but relevant to the current generation. Literally, like the generation that didn't grow up with the Queens of Comedies or the Parkers. I feel like they need to know more about who Monique is and what she's accomplished. That way, when she does that Netflix special, she'll blow up. And I know she's definitely done a lot of work when she was coming up. I'm not denying that whatsoever. But the fact that, Dave Chappelle and Chris Rock were doing tours and whatnot, and then got the Netflix deal, that's because they were selling out all over the world. Then they got Netflix and got the multi-million-dollar deals. But Monique is, selling out apparently like clubs and maybe theaters, but not like arenas and whatnot. So her claiming that she deserves the same amount as the other legends, which she was called a legend, it is something else. It is really something else, because again, I'm not here to say how much Monique is worth, but again, I do feel she is worth more than $500,000. But if I were in Netflix shoes as a company, I'll be thinking, if I'm paying people, then I would pay, the people who I feel and are confident who will bring in a good viewing or good showing. When people click on that button to view the special, I'm going to pay them more than a person who I feel might not make that many views. I mean, from a business standpoint, again, not a discredit to anything that Monique has accomplished, because she has definitely done a lot and has definitely paved the way for other comedians. But at the same time, I feel like her on the Breakfast Club, that was probably one of the most uncomfortable interviews that I've ever watched on the Breakfast Club, because you could, just watching it from my computer screen, you could just definitely feel the tension in the room. Like, it started off in love, just giving each other hugs and whatnot, but then the donkey of the day, I thought that would have been squashed in the first 5 minutes or so, and that would have been it. But even then, it just kept dragging on like the entire interview. Like, I felt like nothing got accomplished in that interview whatsoever. Like, again, I thought that platform would be to straighten out any confusion about the Netflix thing, just squashing the donkey of the day, and then move forward. Like, talk about what your next plans are. But she's just talking about this Netflix thing on every platform she goes on. And then kind of, I guess you could say that this Tyler Perry phone call leak, if you want to call it that, it's kind of like, the Kim Kardashian thing or Kanye West. Like, when they feel like they aren't in the public eye or they losing popularity, they just drop something that, they put out a leak of a photo or something like that just to get their names trending on Twitter again. That's all I feel this conversation was like. What's even worse is, again, like, I don't really know the beef between these two and what went down, but all I got to say is this. Based off what I know, Tyler Perry took it upon himself out of his schedule, because even in the phone calls, like, look, I thought I can call you all up. We can get this straightened out. And then that will be that in no time at all. Because, I got a son, I got a family, and obviously I got a busy schedule. So I decided, look, I'll just call, see if we can straighten things out. And then that'll be that. But I feel like, just like the Breakfast Club interview, I feel like this phone call solved absolutely nothing. Like, Tyler Perry was there to try to make things right and make amends, see what the problem is and rectify it. But what's amazing is Sydney had the audacity in the phone call to say that, you're being rude, cutting us off and everything. But if you listen to that phone call, they wouldn't even let Tyler Perry get a word in. It's like every time he tried to attempt. The thing is, like, anytime that Tyler Perry asked them a question, it would start off like they were about to answer it, but then they would just, well, if you were us and you were in that situation, how would you want to handle? You're literally answering a question with a question. Again, if you go back to the Breakfast Club interview, it's the same damn thing. They refuse to answer a question. I can't have conversation with people like that. It's like, we can't come to a solution if every time I try to attempt to ask you a question to get some more information of how we can solve this problem, don't flip it around with, bringing up how your mom, how would you feel if your mother your mother was a black woman, how would you feel about belittling her and all this other stuff? Look, don't bring that to me. Bring me how you feel we should handle this situation. I felt like this phone call was just as unsettling as the actual Breakfast Club interview. The only difference here is the fact that I guess in some states it is legal to record phone calls and whatnot, as long as one party involved does approve of it. But the thing about that is the person that approves of it could be the person who secretly records it. So in Monique's case, technically it was legal because she gave herself permission to record the phone call, even though Tyler Perry wasn't aware of that. What I feel, and look, I want to talk some more about it, but overall, I feel like I don't know what Monique was trying to accomplish with this, because as I said earlier in the video, the fact that this isn't the entire phone call is a bit disturbing to me, because I feel like they only leaked or released, I want to say leaked or whatever, they put out the parts of the phone call they wanted us to hear. So I can't make a full judgment on it, but I'll just say that if I were in Tyler Perry's shoes, like if I knew that maybe I mistreated someone in some way, shape, or form, whether I said something bad about them or I cut them short on a deal or something like that, and I reached out to them to try to make amends, not to clear my own conscience, but because, you know what, like making up a name like Bob, Bob 3 years ago, I stiffed him when we went out to lunch one day. Like, I didn't pay for my half of the lunch or the meal, or maybe I didn't, maybe he drove me to the bus station one day. I didn't chip in on gas. I wanted to call him up personally to make amends. But every time I tried to open my mouth to solve the situation, he would bring up something like, what if you were the one that drove someone to the bus station and they didn't chip on gas? How would you feel, my brother? Like, that's not solving anything. Like, I called you up not only to apologize, but to make things right. But you're trying to make me feel worse about the situation. And I feel like this phone call was nothing more than trying to get Tyler Perry to, I guess you could say, on record to say that he was wrong for what he said about Monique. But again, that part really confused me. That's one thing that really got me. Like, Sydney, again, just talking about how Tyler Perry was rude for cutting them off and whatnot. But Tyler Perry, my gosh, I can count on like both hands using just, you know, on one hand actually, how many times he was able to talk. And by talk, I mean like not even get full complete sentences in. To be honest, you know, like I worked in a call center for 3 years, so I know what it's like to talk with unruly people, especially the fact when you're trying to solve a problem, especially whether they call in with a problem or you call them up to check on them, because I worked at a call center for a university. So obviously it was about helping people getting in classes, get financial aid and all that other good stuff. But I knew from my experience, like I never had to supervise a call because I handled the situation, whether the student hung up out of anger or they finally calmed down after I told them, you know, look, you calm down, we're going to settle the situation. I know Monique was talking about how she wanted to talk with Madea because she's a real B. Like, you know, Tyler Perry, the billionaire, he ain't down. He act like he doesn't understand. Monique, hell, I'm an everyday person. I don't even understand what y'all want. I know Tyler Perry tried to call y'all up and resolve whatever beef was going down and make things right. But instead of taking it with grace, you just wanted to bring up some old shit that to me seemed irrelevant, because he's a person who was taking time out of his day to give you a call to make things right because he didn't want to make you feel for one day that you were mistreated, disrespected, or not cared about. But you're talking about, you know, your sister over here starving and whatnot. That would be different if you were on the verge of bankruptcy or something like that. But even then, I don't even know how I feel about it. But again, you're trying to make somebody feel bad who's trying to make things right. And that's definitely not how you want to be representing yourself to the public, because just like the boycott Netflix thing, I don't see what was the point of that, because that's kind of a selfish thing. Because again, even if you got the multi-million-dollar deal from the boycott, what would you do with the money? Would you donate to different charities and whatnot and help bring up another up and coming, you know, black or female or both, like a black female comedian or, you know, movie star to help them out? Like, what would you do for the everyday person who surrenders you know, like an avenue like Netflix that we can actually afford? Like, I'm not missing out on these different series that I watch on Netflix because of you. Like, again, what would I gain from that? And the same thing with this, you know, the fact that somebody out here is trying to make things right, but you're just trying to make them feel bad because you want to put it on record that, you know, I guess you could say the main thing is they just wanted Tyler Perry to admit he was wrong instead of, you know, him actually attempting to make things right. And I think that it just gives Monique an even worse you know, I guess you could say persona to the public, because I was a bit disgusted with it. The fact that not only did you record, look, if it's legal, whatever, in some states to record a phone call, whatever, because you know what? We're everyday people who message people back and forth. Sometimes people screenshot messages for ammo, like just to prove they were right or something like that, or to bring an argument up 6 months later. Hey, whatever. But to actually record the phone call and then release parts of it to the public like that is jacked up, because again, the fact that Tyler Perry gave you a call to try and make things right, but then you flipped around and then took like I'm guessing the worst elements of the call that made Tyler Perry look bad. But to be honest, I didn't think Tyler Perry looked bad at all in that call. If anything, he was the one who was actually polite and cordial and acting like he had some common sense when it comes to treating another person like a person instead of somebody they could just walk all over. So when Tyler Perry started to get a bit stern, like, I'm not going to lie, if I were Tyler Perry, I would have pulled a Madea and just cussed him out and just hung the hell up on him. I definitely would have done that. Like, if you want Madea, fine, I want to give you Madea. But you know what, Tyler Perry, I applaud you for maintaining your demeanor during that phone call. I don't know what Monique was trying to accomplish with that. Literally, if you ask me, and I'm not just saying this because this channel is Tyler Perry focused, because as I said time and time again, I am just a fan of the haves and the have-nots and other Tyler Perry projects. I don't work for Tyler Perry. I don't work for OWN. I've never even met Tyler Perry, spoke to Tyler Perry or anything. The closest I have is like talking with various cast members of his shows and whatnot, who just so happen to reach out to me sometimes to let me know they appreciate this channel and, you know, supporting their show. But as I said before, I'm getting no revenue from like OWN or Tyler Perry. You know, I'm just doing this channel and that's that. Like, so I'm not trying to come off as, but I hope in this video, like, you know, you don't get the idea that, oh, well, this guy, he's doing a channel that's based all around Tyler Perry stuff, so of course he's going to side with Tyler Perry. No, it's not that at all. Like, if Tyler Perry was out of the in the wrong and whatnot, you best believe I would say something about it. But if you just listen to this phone call, like, again, if you caught something that my ears didn't, let me know. But from what I can tell, Sydney and Monique definitely were the opposite of polite. Like, literally, just, again, just being someone who worked in a call center for 3 years, I know what it's like to deal with stubborn people and people who would rather complain about a problem. That was one thing about the whole Netflix thing I didn't like. You spent all this time going to like The View and all these other radio venues and whatnot, like Breakfast Club, to talk about, that's all you talk about, the problem. But you're not talking about a solution. The only solution you're talking about is, that was one thing that confused me. She never really said how much she wanted. All she's talking about, the Netflix people called me a legend, but I'm not getting the multi-millions that the legends get. But she never really answered the question. I think somebody like Sway or somebody asked her, it's like, well, how much do you think Monique should get? And she would just say, well, all I know is the legends, like, the Chris Rocks and Dave Chappelle, they getting like like 2-figure $1 million deals. They call me a legend too. So she never really answers the question. So I feel like and plus I was a communications major too in college. So I do have some insight with this. All I know is when you are asked a question, you should definitely answer the question instead of answering a question with a question, like giving all these hypothetical situations, talking about, as a black woman, like, if it was your mother and stuff. Like, don't bring that to me. Answer the question, then we can move on to the next one. But all I gotta say is this: Tyler Perry gave her a call to try to straighten things out. Nothing got resolved. It was literally her just going back and forth with him. Like, I'm a fan of Nephew Tommy, Steve Harvey's nephew. Like, his prank phone calls back during my call center days, I would love listening to those on Spotify in between phone calls. They would have me rolling. Like, one of my favorite bits from him is like, look, I ain't going back and forth with you. Like, he would call up people in different personas. Man, you know what, Monique, give Nephew Tom, Thomas Miles, I would love for him to have a phone call with Monique and Sydney. That would have me in stitches. I would love. They should make that happen. Thomas, give Monique and Sydney a call. I would love. Give them a prank. No. Nephew Tommy, call Monique. Pretending you're like an executive of Netflix or something like that. I know you're going to record the call, but I know Monique and her husband are going to record it as well. I would love for that to happen. Like, make that happen. I would buy that. Matter of fact, Nephew Tommy, if you're listening in Walmart, last week, I actually picked up a copy of your, what was it? The Lost Prank Call Volume 1, the one with like the bus driver, Rayford, the mechanic, and just other great, what was it? Corporal Punishment. I love your work. I would love to see a Nephew Tommy, Monique, and Sydney phone call, prank call. That would be great. But overall, if there's any news in the future, feel free to shoot me an email or contact me on my social media, because in the link to the description below, you'll see, my eBay, Patreon, Twitter, Have Not Facebook group, Instagram. Hit me up if you have any other news on this story. But in the comment section below, let's just have an open and friendly discussion, unlike the phone call you heard. What do you think about Monique and Sydney? If you ask me, this did nothing positive for her persona. If anything, this just proves the fact that she's difficult to work with. If she's willing to not just record, but release a phone call with somebody who's actually trying to make things right, I don't know if she's ever going to work again in terms of like big time Hollywood or whatever. I mean, after the whole Netflix thing, even though I didn't agree with how she handled it, because some stuff you handle behind closed doors instead of it is almost like like Prince and Warner Brothers or Michael Jackson with Sony. Like, hey, look, there are some things we're fighting for. Then sometimes it's just like, I don't think so, because I think that's one of the reasons Charlamagne gave her donkey the other day, because she was talking about injustice and gender inequality and stuff like that when it comes to being paid. But you really can't say that when two brothers are making, I forgot, what was it, like 15 or so 12 or 15 million for their Netflix specials, Rock and Chappelle. Amy, was given 11, but I think she bumped it up to 30. I'm sorry, I forgot the amounts, but I know that Chappelle and Rock made a lot more, but Amy was a couple million behind them, and then Monique was given 500,000 as an offer. So you really can't say that there's any kind of injustice there because it really has to do with popularity and the people that Netflix knows for a fact that subscribers would click on to watch their specials. So that's just my 2 cents. This video is longer than I thought it would be. But to be honest, I'm glad I waited several days for the story to come out. That way I can give it my full thoughts instead of just doing a rant video as soon as it came out, because I try to get as much information as possible before doing these breaking news videos. So again, the link to the actual article and video clips are in the description below. I think I said this at the 4-minute mark. I think that would have been better if you read the article and listened to the clips and then come back. That way, when I'm going on my tirade or whatever, you would understand what I'm talking about. But I felt like I kept myself calm during this conversation. I just gave my perspective, my opinion. Let me know what yours are in the comment section below. Subscribe if you haven't done so already, and I'll talk to you all later.